Canadian officials are scrambling to get an exemption from new American rules for dogs entering the United States. The rules, introduced by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, are set to take effect next month. They apply to dogs being brought into the U.S. or returning to the States with their American owners. Dogs will have to be microchipped and certified proof of rabies vaccination. Karina Roman has more.
It's a new U.S. policy for the world. Beginning August 1st, if you want to take your dog to the U.S. The health minister says Canada was blindsided by the move.
I've been very clear with the Secretary. I think Canada should be exempt as a country that is not a source country for rabies.
There will now be a grace period beyond August 1st, so people taking their dogs into the U.S., whether Canadians or returning Americans, will get a warning first if they are without a health and rabies vaccination certification from a veterinarian and without a specific CDC form.
We're all for proof of vaccination. Every dog in Canada should be vaccinated against rabies. Having these forms done by veterinarians in Canada is going to take a lot of time to get that validated.
The rules also include that dogs have to be at least 6 months of age and they must be microchipped. Holland warns of negative impacts to tourism in both directions and to trade and supply chains reliant on a smoothly run border. He says he is hoping saner heads prevail and says conversations with American officials are ongoing. Karina Roman, CBC News, Ottawa.
For more on this, I'm joined by Diane Bergeron, president of CNIB Guide Dogs and a guide dog user herself. So first, what have you been hearing from fellow guide dog users since the CDC in the U.S. announced these new rules?
Yeah, there's been a lot of concerns, of course, and also just a lot of confusion. The rules seem to be changing day by day, and right now, hour by hour, it seems like. So people are really not understanding exactly what it is that they're going to need. But the biggest concern for Canadian guide dog handlers that I've been hearing is that there's going to be extra cost, which is difficult. The cost of things are going up. And so, requiring extra funds to be able to do things is a burden on people. But just the inability to get forms completed, to be able to get to where you need to get things signed, and all the extra burden that's being put on people to cross the border is very difficult, specifically for people with disabilities and for people like myself who are blind, who use guide dogs. A lot of the forms are not accessible. Transportation is an issue. There's just several complications.
So do you think it will stop some people from traveling to the U.S.?
Oh, absolutely. It's also going to change some people's travel plans. This is also going to be an issue if you're traveling not just to the U.S., but there's a lot of places that people travel to where they have to go through the U.S. to get to those other countries. And so these forms are going to have to be completed for that as well. And for someone who travels, I do a lot of international work, so I travel frequently. This is extremely difficult to get all of these requirements taken care of.
Now, was the CNIB consulted at all before this was announced?
We were not consulted by the CDC. I have been in touch with Minister Kara's office and CFIA to have conversations around some of the complications. But because this is an American piece of legislation or regulations, they have not consulted with us. There is a lot of organizations of and for the blind in the United States who are even looking at legislative processes and looking to talk to the government about even potentially going to court to make some of these changes. We're not a part of that because we're in Canada, but we're trying to work from our end to support individuals going back and forth who have guide dogs.
Well, given the fact the federal health minister is speaking out about these changes and got some concessions, are you at all optimistic the CDC will rethink the new rules or even give Canada an exemption?
Well, I'm always optimistic and always hoping for the best. Ultimately something has to be done. Right now, if I wanted, with the rules as they sit at the moment, if I wanted to travel after August 1st to the United States with my guide dog, and she is a guide dog trained at CNIB Guide Dogs, which is International Guide Dog Federation accredited, I would have to have not just my rabies certificate, I would have to have an export form completed by probably the same vet who signed the rabies certificate in the first place, which really is redundant. And then I would need to do the CDC form, which I've checked, and it is not fully accessible for someone who's blind who uses a screen reader. So that needs to be fixed. There's a requirement for a photo of the dog, which a blind person cannot take a very specific photo on their own. They'd have to get assistance with that. And honestly, I don't understand why, when the dog has a microchip that can identify them, a black lab looks like a black lab. So I'm not sure how they're going to identify the dog specifically. And so that form needs to be done. And then if you're traveling by air, the Department of Transportation and the airlines require two forms, one for a service dog form and another form identifying that your dog will not relieve or cause damage during their travel. And then the airlines may ask for extra forms. So that's just to travel with your service animal and all the forms that you have to do. Whereas what I believe all you should have to do is provide your rabies certificate, which is already signed and certified by a vet to meet the requirements, and your identification card from your province or from your school, your guide dog program, showing that you're coming from an International Guide Dog Federation accredited program or certified by your province. And that should be all that you need to do any travel with a guide dog.
All right. It is a story we will be following. And thank you so much for your take on it, Diane. We appreciate it.
Thank you.